Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to have Devin Bronstein from the Illinois Office of Broadband on to kick off the round for Wave 2 of Connect Illinois and have you on here to receive all of the greatest information and really thankful to Devin for her time. We are happy to partner, Illinois Extension's happy to partner on this outreach just by hosting, and we thank Illinois Office of Broadband for always providing such great content and direct outreach to all of the states. So without further ado, Devin, you can take it from here.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy belated Memorial Day weekend. Really happy to see such a strong crowd on here today as we reach this exciting milestone of wrapping up the first wave of the BEAD program and launching Wave 2. So we are in the process of getting our map and all of our forms live again. So hopefully by the end of this call, everything will be live and out there, and then folks will be receiving communications about their Wave 1 applications, but we will cover all of that in today's webinar. So I will go ahead and share my screen. And for those of you I have not met, thank you so much for being here. My name is Devin Bronstein, and I lead the Illinois Office of Broadband. Okay. How's that look for a screen share?
Looks great.
Awesome. So welcome to our first webinar for BEAD Wave 2 here in Illinois. This is our kickoff webinar, and we'll be covering 4 buckets of topics today. So we'll start with our recap of BEAD. We'll also acknowledge some of the changes that we do anticipate in the federal government and kind of what we've been hearing. Then we'll share an update on the serviceability updates process that many of you participated in this past winter. Then the exciting Wave 1 results, we'll share some kind of aggregate information and stats of what we saw in Wave 1 and preliminary award information. And then most importantly, we'll share an overview of Wave 2, some rules of the road, how to apply, and where you can find resources and documentation. All right. So a quick recap of the BEAD program. As you hopefully know by now, BEAD is a $42.45 billion federal program that is intended to connect all unserved and underserved households and community anchor institutions to quality and affordable broadband over a 5-year time period. Before we move into the Illinois specific portion today, I do want to start with kind of a disclaimer and a little caveat as we move into Wave 2 to share what we've been hearing from NTIA. And, you know, we're an open book here and happy to answer questions and talk through any thoughts or concerns that folks may be having. So as you may know, NTIA lives in the U.S. Department of Commerce. And the Department of Commerce, back in a few months ago now, has announced that they are conducting what they're calling a rigorous review of the BEAD program. So no formal changes have been made. States have gotten a 90-day extension on turning in their final proposals, which kind of aligns with Illinois' timeline anyway. So definitely not unhappy to see that extension. But NTIA has shared that changes are expected potentially in the early summer. Could be sooner, could be later. We do not have a firm timeline, but we are prepared to kind of review and incorporate any new guidance as it does come out. A couple of things that we've heard. So one, we heard that NTIA wants to make this program tech neutral. This could mean a variety of things, and so we are kind of waiting to see how that translates into policy and program rules, and then we'll adjust and make sure folks here are in the loop and informed accordingly. It might also change how states evaluate applications, and if that is the case, again, we'll kind of evaluate what the requirements are and what that means for this program. Our goal is to keep moving and keep this momentum, not redo work, and we definitely don't want all the folks here to have to redo processes and take more time and spend any unnecessary funding on this program. So for now, our goal is to make sure that prospective applicants, A, are aware of their preliminary Wave 1 awards, and that'll be coming before end of day today. And then 2, can start preparing for Wave 2 by looking at the available project area units, which will be published, I think, within the next hour. So kind of regardless of any changes to the program rules and how we'll run it, the project area units will be out there, and we're really excited to see your applications for Wave 2. And we'll be ready to incorporate any federal requirements sort of if and when they come down. But overall, as you'll hear today, we are really proud of our Wave 1 results. We saw really great interest, lots of strong applications, and lots of preliminary awards coming out later today. So we want to keep this momentum and build on our results and meet the timeline that we've committed to, which is starting construction in 2026. Finally, like many states, we have been advocating for that changes should be minimal, perhaps opt-in sort of changes, and overall kind of warning against changes that could cause wholesale revisions to our process that might lead us to have to rerun processes or make changes at the state General Assembly level. So again, happy to talk more about this offline and discuss how it could impact you or not, but wanted to kind of go into this process with eyes wide open. And with that, I will get started. So I mentioned that BEAD overall is a federal $42.45 billion program. This involved allocating funding to all 50 states and territories to meet their statewide goals of connecting every last unserved and underserved location and community anchor institution. So here in Illinois, we were allocated $1.04 billion to achieve this goal within the next 5 years. Exciting milestone that we have moved into Wave 2 of our subgrantee selection process. So this slide recaps what our subgrantee selection process looks like. As many of you know, we launched our first wave back in January. This wave had 2 areas of focus. One on fiber projects, so projects that were scored and preliminarily awarded were end-to-end fiber. And they also had to meet the requirement of including at least 10% of hard-to-serve project area units. So these were designated on our Wave 1 map, and applicants had to include, out of all their project area units that they proposed to cover, at least 10% or more of those had to be designated as hard-to-serve. So we went through the process of Wave 1, conducted a phase called deconfliction, where we took those higher scoring projects and then compared them with lower scoring projects to kind of carve out and de-scope locations accordingly, and used all of that to land on the final set of preliminary awards, which I'll talk about soon. So now, as of today, we will be launching Wave 2. Again, those application forms should be opening this afternoon. And this is open to all remaining locations with any reliable broadband service technology. So no more hard to serve requirements. This is really our chance to pick up all of those remaining locations. And there is a significant amount of PAUs left, which I'll share soon. Also notable in Wave 2 is that we will, at the end of this wave, define our extremely high cost per location threshold, or this crazy acronym here, EHCPLT. I'll probably just call it a threshold. But what this threshold will say is that the state has the option to go back to applicants whose projects cross the threshold and work with them to reduce their costs, which might mean changing up their mix of technologies. The state will have the option to award those projects at a higher cost, or will have the option to remove that award and actually put that location back on the open market and potentially choose another applicant that uses a wider mix of technologies or is able to do the project for a lower cost within the threshold. So one reason why we call all of this preliminary is that the extremely high cost per location threshold could make Wave 1 awards look a bit different. This wave will run from May 27th through July 16th. And then we will go through the same process again of evaluating applications, looking at entity qualifications, making sure that all entities meet the state and NTIA requirements. We will do project qualifications, score projects, go through deconfliction again, conduct budget due diligence and negotiations. And then, as needed, if there are still outstanding locations to cover, we will launch an optional wave 3, where we'll kind of work with those applicants who have been preliminarily awarded to try and scoop up remaining locations. And this is the opportunity where we'll also accept applications from alternative technologies like low Earth orbit satellite and unlicensed fixed wireless. So kind of the final tying everything up and making sure that all locations are claimed by an internet service provider. Quick review on PAUs. I know many folks in this room are probably Wave 1 veterans, but others are brand new to this process, so happy to kind of jump back and share a little bit of review here. So we use this term PAU. It stands for Project Area Unit. These are the building blocks of an application. So every application includes one or more PAUs. It's like the sort of smallest unit that you can apply for, the smallest piece of the puzzle. PAUs are clusters of eligible locations that are no more than 5 miles apart. They were pulled together using an algorithm. And again, there are these building blocks of applications. So you can apply for as few as one PAU and as many as all the PAUs that are available. A few more definitions here. So when we talk about locations, we talk about them in two different categories. The first is broadband serviceable locations, or BSLs. And these are business or residential locations where fixed broadband access is or can be installed. Within this category of BSLs, we have three classifications based on the speed available. Unserved locations are our top priority to connect through this program, and these are locations that either have no internet access or they might have access, but it doesn't quite qualify as 25 over 3 megabits per second service. Our next tier is underserved locations. So these are locations that may have 25 over 3 Mbps, but not quite our new definition of broadband, which is 100 over 20 megabits per second. These are underserved and our second priority. And then served locations, we have evidence that they do have 100 over 20 megabits per second in speeds or greater. So our focus, as we'll talk about, is unserved and underserved. Community anchor institutions are schools, libraries, health facilities, government buildings, certain park facilities, and eligible CAIs are those that, based on our data, do not have access to gigabit symmetrical service. And so these locations will be on the map, and we ask that you include them in your applications. Should we get to the end of the process and we are over budget and need to kind of cull down, community anchor institutions would be kind of the first to be removed. But again, our goal is really to include everything as we're making this historic investment. So we'll be doing a demo of our project area selection tool next week. But this screenshot on the side kind of shows you what to expect. So every colored dot is a BSL that is eligible to be connected through the BEAD program. And then every triangle is a community anchor institution or CAI. So where are we starting? Last year, around this time, we were wrapping up the challenge process where we published the BDC data, the FCC's data on the service that every location in our state has. We accepted evidence from internet service providers, nonprofits, local governments, challenging that current state. Then we went through a rebuttal period, final adjudication, and submitted these results to NTIA, who gave us approval back in November. And what this approval means is that we have our sort of universe of locations that we as a state are required. So in total, we have just over 175,000 eligible locations, and I'll kind of walk you through what this looks like on a map. So out of Illinois' 4.2 million broadband serviceable locations, we have 107,000 unserved BSLs, so all the pink dots on the map. We also have around 65,000 underserved BSLs, all the blue dots on the map. And then everything green, around 4 million BSLs, are locations that already have service, so they are considered served. And so by the end of this process, we will have a fully green map. I'll also mention the just over 3,300 eligible community anchor institutions, which it is also our goal to connect. We'll talk about the serviceability updates process and locations that are kind of removed from this map because we have evidence that they already have broadband service. So stay tuned for that shortly. So here we have our timeline. Hopefully this is familiar to many of you. Updates since we last spoke, we completed wave 1, received 238 applications from 26 different entities. We then conducted deconfliction to descope and remove the overlap between high-scoring projects, and then determine those preliminary awards. Today, applicants will be informed of the status of all of their Wave 1 proposals, and then Wave 2 will be open today, again, inviting applications from all reliable broadband technologies. So you can see our history here starting December 2023. It has been a long road, and so we are so excited to be, I think, in the last maybe 30% or so of the process here with the opening of our second application wave today. A quick reminder about pre-qualification. So we had around 41 entities participate in pre-qualification summer, which meant that they submitted materials to help get sort of pre-approval for certain qualifications that we'll need from entities ahead of preliminary awarding applications. So this was optional, but strongly encouraged. If you did not participate, that is not a barrier to participating now. And if you did participate, hopefully this makes your application process a little bit quicker and easier, both for you as the applicant and for us as the reviewer. So at the end of the pre-qual process, everyone who participated received an email that looked something like this, that showed the qualifications that you were approved for. And then this should inform how you apply during this wave. So you'll see on the Wave 2 entity form, same as the Wave 1 entity form, you'll have a chance under this question, pre-qualification process participation, to answer yes to did you participate in the BEAD-funded Connect Illinois pre-qualification process? And if so, you'll share your pre-qualification ID, which can be found in this letter that you received from us at the end of pre-qualification. And then you'll indicate which qualifications you were approved for. So we ask that you reference this letter and then look here at the application and check off the ones that you were selected for. And one caveat here is that if you are an RDOF awardee, we do ask for updated documentation on your progress using the same template that you completed previously, but updated since some time has passed since we did this back in, I think, June, July time period. So we got some more specific instructions here. And we're happy to support you during office hours if you need help on any of that. Okay. I will move on to the next section, and if Shubika is on, pass it over to you to walk us through section 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Devin. Hello, everybody. Happy to talk about the serviceability update sections. As Devin had previously mentioned, a lot of you have already participated in this process. We were accepting feedback between January and February earlier this year. So for those of you who've participated in the process, you're kind of familiar with it, but for ones who were not able to, here's like a quick overview of what this really means. So what is it for, as Devin had previously shared, we'd identified nearly 175,000 eligible locations and CAIs within the state. So this was essentially a way for providers to report to us that these are locations that actually do not require BEAD funding because they already have existing service, or there are also a few other serviceability updates categories which could have led to a location now being categorized as a no BEAD required location. So that is essentially the need for why we carried out this process. Just making sure that, the challenge process was happening sometime around this time last year. We were finalizing results, so it's already been a year since then. And if there have been networks that have been expanded or more information about locations that do not actually need to be connected to internet, we definitely wanted to know that information and make sure that we're able to most effectively utilize the dollars that we have remaining for BEAD. So that is how this feedback has been incorporated. How did we determine or make our final decisions on the submissions? So it was based on evidence that was submitted by internet service providers. So back in January, when we were accepting this feedback, we had laid out guidance for the different kind of evidence pieces that we would be requiring for the different categories under serviceability updates. So we worked with a lot of you also on just making sure that we had what we needed in order to verify service or why locations should not have service based on the submissions. So that was one of the elements. And then there was also some internal analysis for some of the reason codes that we could do on our end so that we did not have to collect individual feedback on those. There was that aspect. And then we also had to verify a lot of the submissions that came in with the FCC National Broadband Map. And this was essentially based on NTIA's guidance for validating these serviceability update submissions, just to make sure that we're 100% certain that these locations that we will be taking out of the map actually have the service that is being reported. So just walking everybody through the different reason codes or categories that I mentioned previously, under which we were accepting submissions. So we had opened for feedback for reason codes 4 and 5 here, but I'll also walk you through some of the other ones that we were able to incorporate. So reason code 1 being should not have a broadband connection. So the location was demolished, or it's a support structure like a barn or a silo in a farm that actually does not need to be connected to the internet. So information around that. Again, we've not done an extensive research on this reason code statewide. So there might be future opportunities to share additional feedback on some of these reason codes. So we'll keep you posted on that. Reason code 2. So the location does not need mass market broadband due to the nature of use. So it could be a CAI, it could be a business that does not use mass market solutions, or a government structure, for example, that again would not want to subscribe to mass market and has other solutions to connect to the internet. Reason code 3 was removed from the latest version of the FCC fabric. So some context here for all of you who've participated in the process previously might be aware that the location list that we have is based on Fabric version 3, and there is an update to the Fabric, which is essentially all of the locations within the state that should be connected to mass market internet. So there are constant updates to this, and the latest that's currently available is version 6. So what we did was for the entire state, just compare the two versions and basically incorporated feedback for locations that do not exist on the latest version of the fabric, meaning, through analysis and through the different iterations of the fabric, we have recognized that these might be support structures or say empty lots, or just like a lot of other places that do not require connection to the internet. So we were able to remove a lot of those through reason code 3 for the state of Illinois. Again, if there's more of these, we're definitely potentially going to be opening another wave of feedback to receive that input. And then there was reason code 4, which is locations have already been served by an enforceable commitment. So again, another state or federal program that helps connect to the threshold of 100 by 20 reliable technology internet. And reason code 5, where the location is now served by a non-subsidized service. So any expansion through private dollars could have been submitted through this. And again, we had guidance for the different types of evidence that had to be incorporated to make this a successful submission. And we also had to compare that to the latest FCC National Broadband Map. In the next slide now, we'll just see how many of these were incorporated. So based on all of the feedback and the internal analysis that we did and the comparison to the FCC maps, we were able to take off nearly 10,000 locations from the BEAD eligible map for Illinois. And then we have the different reason codes that I just walked you through and the number of locations that we were able to incorporate in each of those on the right hand side here in the table. So you can definitely take a look at that. We also sent out communications to all of the individual entities who had participated in the process with the results for how each of their submission was evaluated and whether or not it was approved. So if there are any questions there, again, you can just respond to that email and let us know. We'll be happy to help you with why a submission was approved or not. So these will be incorporated for wave two. And what that means is they've been categorized as no bead required. And we will essentially not be spending bead dollars to connect to these locations, again, because we've established that they either do not require service or they already have existing service which qualifies bead standards. So that is for all of the processes moving forward. But for preliminarily awardees who might have already incorporated those locations in their proposals, we will definitely be getting back in touch with you to de-scope some of those locations that we have identified as no bead so that your budgets can accurately reflect the locations that you need to connect to. And then you have an accurate list of locations that you will be required to connect through the bead program. So that sums up a lot of the serviceability updates process and how we went about this. Again, as I mentioned, there might be future opportunities to share feedback, so we'll stay tuned for that. Passing it back to Devin.
Thank you so much, Shubika. And I see some questions, so we will take note of those and then get to them after our fourth section here. All right. So moving along to wave one results, we're excited to share some kind of high-level stats of what we saw. If you've been to any of my presentations this spring, this might look familiar to you, but hopefully we'll share some new and fresh information and then instructions for wave two. So overall in wave one, Illinois received 238 applications proposing to serve 86% of the state of eligible locations and 85% of hard-to-serve project area units. So to share a breakdown of this, you can see on the map here, in total, the blue and the red include or are encompassed of those 238 applications. So every kind of dot here is a PAU. This totaled 151,000 locations that we received applications for. So again, 86% of our eligible total. And this is broken down by around 5,600 regular PAUs, meaning not hard to serve. This is all the blue shaded area on the map. And then we received applications for just under 1,600 of our hard to serve project area units, which are the red dots on the map. So we were really excited to see the interest and demand that this represents. You'll see soon that our actual awards are a bit smaller than this because we also looked at things like eligibility for the first wave, meeting requirements, and then cost as well. So there is much more than 14% of the state left, and we will get to that soon. So to share some details on who we saw applications from. We received applications from 26 unique entities across 4 different entity types with a median of 1 application submitted per organization. So over here, we're looking at the number of entities that submitted applications by type. So you can see the bulk were private for-profit companies, plus 4 cooperatives, 1 municipality, and 1 public or private utility. And then here we're looking at the number of applications submitted per entity. So the majority of entities submitted between 1 and 5 applications. And then we have a handful that submitted between 6 and 10, 11 to 15, and just 2 that submitted over 15 applications. So I think we can say that the bulk of the applications that we saw in wave 1 were kind of targeted into just a few applications, but that's kind of based on applicant strategy and how they are looking to put forth the most competitive application. Next, we'll talk about the size and competition of these applications across PAUs in wave 1. So first, let's look at the size. Most applications included 10 or fewer PAUs. So you can see on the left-hand side here, our biggest group included between 10 PAUs, and we've got a pretty large number here for 10 and under. And then just 19 applications requested more than 50 PAUs, with several applications falling in the middle. And then competition, just under 30% of PAUs received competition from multiple bidders here. So you can see these are the count of PAUs that received more than one application, with around 1,400 receiving 2, 520 receiving 3, and then going over to the end, we had 13 PAUs which received competition from 6 different applications. So the exciting update is our preliminary awards for Wave 1. So out of our total set of applications, Illinois has preliminarily selected 137 applications, covering 57% of eligible locations statewide and 35% of hard-to-serve project area units. So we have a similar map here that has been updated to cover those preliminary selectees. I'll share the breakdown of this 137 applications. So in total, this preliminarily awards around 94,000 eligible locations, removing those that no longer require BEAD funding. And this includes just under 1,700 regular PAUs and 628 hard-to-serve PAUs, which is again 35% of the total. So looking at the map, all of the red and blue shading represents PAUs that are preliminarily awarded, and this will be mirrored on that project area selection tool. And so all of the gray PAUs are what's remaining. So a couple of highlights here. Again, in Wave 1, it was pretty high bar for participation. We had a handful of requirements here that applicants did need to successfully reach. They had to be end-to-end fiber projects. They had to have at least 10% of hard-to-serve project area units. And these hard-to-serve PAUs had to be contiguous with other PAUs from this applicant, meaning when you drew a line from the hard-to-serve to the closest not hard-to-serve, you had to be able to draw a straight line without hitting any PAUs that were not selected. And this is so we can avoid cherry picking and make sure that these projects kind of make sense in the region, so we're successful in the long term. A couple highlights. Again, we received 238 applications in Wave 1 for covering 86% of the state. We then removed 10,218 locations through that serviceability updates process. Preliminarily selected 137 applications, which cover 57% of eligible locations, subtracting out those locations that no longer require BEAD funding. And again, this is around 94,000 locations with 35% of hard-to-serve PAUs and $551 million in private match, with the note that we'll be reducing scopes going back to applicants to account for the locations that do not require BEAD service. So that number will likely be reduced slightly once our overall universe is also reduced. And so for Wave 2, we have 71,600 locations eligible for application. And again, folks will be receiving communications about all of their Wave 1 applications later this afternoon. None of those have gone out yet, so if you've not heard anything, that is to be expected, and we're working on getting those out as soon as we can. So this slide is very important because it talks about what does preliminarily selected mean. And I've gotten questions about confidentiality and what the state can say and what applicants can say. So wanted to just kind of share guidance head on here. So the term preliminarily selected is used because projects will not be even provisional until we submit them to NTIA for their review. Only after we have a meeting with NTIA, we submit our final proposal and we run all 2 to 3 waves of this process, can we consider these provisional and then ultimately a final awardee. And this is because there are a lot of things that are subject to change. So going back, projects that were preliminarily selected met state and federal requirements, and they earned the highest score for their selected PAUs. So they have been they will be shared. We will share with them a list of PAUs and locations that they are preliminarily selected to serve. A subset of proposals with a high BEAD outlay are rolled over to Wave 2 for review against other applications and the extremely high cost per location thresholds. And again, grant awards will not be issued and construction cannot begin until after the completion of the 2 to 3 wave subgrantee selection process and NTIA approval. One of the parameters that are a part of this requirement is that the Office of Broadband, cannot disclose the names of awardees. So while we will publish the preliminarily awarded areas, we are able to share who has been awarded, and we're not able to answer questions about that either. With that being said, preliminary awardees are welcome to, as long as they're aware of this big caveat of preliminary, share as they're building their Wave 2 applications with, for example, organized labor if they're trying to secure a project labor agreement, or with community if they're trying to build up their evidence of local support component of their application, and we will get to more of that. So why are selections preliminary? What may occur that could lead to changes in the award? First, as I shared, we'll be setting the extremely high cost per location thresholds at the close of Wave 2. If your application is over the threshold, you may have the option to revise it to come within the threshold, such as by revising your mix of technologies, or the IOB may opt to award you even though you're above it. And if you can't come down, we may put that set of locations back out on the open market, and thus you would no longer be preliminarily awarded. We'll also be doing further budget due diligence to make sure that we're stretching these dollars as far as we can, using the dollars most efficiently. So looking at match per location, average cost per pass, comparing budgets against a set of benchmarks to make sure, again, that we are using these federal dollars as efficiently as we can to reach our goal of universal connectivity. We'll also be reaching back out to preliminary awardees to de-scope locations that no longer require BEAD funding. So we right now have estimates that we're working off of for the changes in these awards, but we'll be working with you one-on-one to revise your project scopes from a geography standpoint and a cost standpoint. We in Wave 3 may come back to you to make scope adjustments to increase your the project area that you're covering to make sure that we're covering, again, all PAUs in the state. In, as well as NTIA. So we would love to share the preliminary winners, but these are the restrictions that we are operating within. So what you'll receive later today if you applied for Wave 1 is first a PDF letter explaining just kind of like what a preliminary award means and all of the different outcomes that your applications could land in. And then you'll receive a associated Excel document that has a tab for each of these 4 categories, and it lists out all of your applications and categorizes them in each tab, so you know how to tab accordingly. So read the letter closely. There's a lot of important information there, and we are happy to talk things through in office hours or offline if you need any help kind of interpreting it. Okay, last section here, and then we will get to our questions. So I got a question in the chat before about how do you actually apply. So this will be very helpful. There are 3 different components of the Illinois BEAD application process: the entity submission form, the project submission form, and the application submission form. So the entity form is for any unique organization who is applying. On this form, we'll collect qualifications about your organization that we need in order to make a preliminary award. So things like conflict of interest disclosure, your W-9, your financials, etc. You only need to submit this form once. So if you applied in Wave 1, even if you didn't get awarded, you sort of have this form in our records, and if updates are needed, we can work with you on that in Wave 2, but you do only need to apply once. Submit the entity submission form once. Your project submission form will include all of the details and documentation about your specific proposal. So think budget documents, network designs, pro formas, your grant application form, anything that is specific to that project that you are submitting. So naturally, you will need to submit one project form per project. So you may be one entity who opts to submit 5 different project forms, and that is very acceptable and something that we saw in Wave 1. And then finally, this is a requirement again from DCEO. So we do need you to submit this final application submission form. It's a very easy, form, and you'll just submit your entity information and then your entity ID and project ID that you'll get from the previous 2 forms. And again, this will be submitted once per project. So all of this is laid out in the application guidebook and on our website, but we cannot consider your application unless you meet all 3 steps before that 5 p.m. deadline on July 16th. And these links, again, are on our website and in our application guidebook, and we'll be sharing out a kind of comprehensive email after this with all of this information. So to give you a preview, this is what the entity form looks like. There are places to enter information, to make selections, or to upload files and attachments. We have the project form, similar, a bit longer, and you can read the application guidebook in advance to kind of collect all of the documentation in one place, submit. And then the application submission form, it is very simple. Again, it's just to kind of like tie that bow around your application and show the state that it has been formally submitted. A couple of updates on our project area selection tool. So there are 2 updates I wanted to share that will be live today. The PAUs that are preliminarily awarded will be marked in gray. So you can see this new icon on the legend, and they will not be selectable on the map. So you can't add them to your shopping cart anymore. And 2, we have new symbology for those locations that no longer require BEAD funding. And those are marked as black circles for locations and black triangles for CAIs. And this will kind of show up accordingly in your CSV download and in your shopping cart here as calling out locations that do not require BEAD funding and thus don't need to be included in your total count. We are having 2 webinars next week that will go through all of these templates, and so we'll kind of go into this in more detail and do a demo then. A couple flags here. We require use of a standard template for a few different qualifications here. And these are all linked in the application guidebook. So you click on the link and the template downloads. So then you can save it to your local computer, fill it out, save it, and then upload it as part of your application. So that is something to look out for as you are applying. And again, webinars next week, I believe Tuesday and Wednesday, we'll be walking through each template, doing a demonstration and answering questions on how to fill it out. This is the full list of templates here, and I'll let folks kind of look at this. I'll send the slides around after the fact so you can see exactly what each template is. And then this slide recaps our scoring rubric. So we are required to use a standard scoring rubric across this process that was approved by NTIA. So you can see how the points are distributed across the primary and secondary categories here, and use this to your advantage to craft as strong of an application as you can. It's relatively cut and dry how we will be reviewing and scoring these, so feel free to leverage this and play around with different scenarios as you're building your application. As you can see, the non-state match, so the skin in the game that you are putting forth, carries a lot of weight here, as well as the dollars that you are requesting. Just note that, while we encourage folks to be competitive and put forth a high match, request a moderate amount of dollars, we also want to make sure that you're requesting enough to make sure your project is successful at the end of So that's why we have subject matter experts who are reviewing your network designs and narratives, technical narratives, budgets in depth to kind of ask probing questions to make sure, again, that you can achieve what you are setting out to achieve, because then we'll all be successful. Just flagging here that we have this local coordination section, and there are two different buckets here, and this is a really great opportunity to kind of earn extra points, or, extra credit, if you will. 5%, you can earn up to 5% of the total by including one of five, or, within these 5 examples of supporting evidence. This can be letters of support from community members, local governments, local organizations, demonstration of how the project fits into an existing community plan, a survey that you've either, received from a community that speaks to their broadband needs, or one that you've conducted, any evidence of outreach, whether you've, hosted a town hall or had conversations with community groups, and any other, again, evidence that you have been, thoughtful and intentional about meeting with locals and understanding their needs, and how you incorporated that in your project application. And then the second bucket here is the verified financial commitment. So if part of your match is coming from a local contribution, such as, maybe funding through a budget resolution in a county government, for example, or in-kind donations from, a local government giving you waived permit fees or access to their conduit, all of that can help you earn some points here. If you're submitting evidence of local support, make sure that you clarify which letters are associated with which PAUs or which part of the projects, and you're providing documentation for everything that you're talking about in the narrative. This will allow our merit reviewers to kind of have a really clear picture of how to apply what you're putting forth, and how that incorporates into your sort of broader project narrative and approach. All right, we are nearing the end here, and then I know we have a handful of questions coming in. The application guidebook is now online and has been updated, mainly with some clarifications to make sure that folks are filling in their applications as efficiently and accurately as possible. So please make sure to look at this updated application guidebook and re-download it if you have an older version on our website now at the same link. A couple of updates that were made from our original version to this new version. We added a naming convention for uploads, so please be sure to adhere to that. A reminder to use standard templates, some clarifications around 4 to 5 questions to make sure that it's crystal clear in what we are asking of you. And then looking for some kind of direct input on questions like fiber mileage, where things got a little bit lost in the broader program narrative. So this allows us to do our analysis more clearly and come back to you with fewer questions. A couple of template updates were also made for Wave 2. So while the pro forma was optional in the previous round, and we also accepted sort of your homegrown pro formas that met our set of requirements, this time we are standardizing for sort of ease and time, avoiding that back and forth. We'll be talking through that next week. Our project area selection template now accounts for the variety of technologies that could come through for Wave 2. So please download a new version of that. Again, this is online, linked in the guidebook. Our project schedule template is updated with some 2 different options for showing the total number of months of your project. The professional engineer certification now includes the fiber miles that we ask for. And the project cost template has not really changed, but we do include a reminder that we will need costs at the unit level. So again, please make sure to look at the guidebook that's online now and download those new project templates. We have a notice of funding opportunity online. This is the same as Wave 1, but the dates are updated now. So this is kind of the rules of the road, the formal document that will look most like your future grant agreement. And then some final reminders here. I think I talked through some of this already, but Airtable, unfortunately, does not save progress. You can't log in. So we highly recommend compiling all of your application materials separately and then filling out your Airtable form. You can do this in one session so you don't lose your work. And a reminder again that don't leave it till the last minute or even the last hour because the system might be overloaded. We might be, overwhelmed with technical support questions and not be able to help anyone. So while we hope that our technology works perfectly, it may not. So we encourage you to submit far in advance, or at least, prior to that last couple of hours, to avoid any hiccups because we are not permitted to review anything that was submitted after 5 p.m. Central on the deadline. A reminder to use our templates. We have an updated naming convention here that folks are required to use. And then finally, I'll just share again, awards are preliminary. The state cannot share the names of entities who have been preliminarily awarded, but applicants are welcome to I discourage you from making any announcements, given that this is very much informal and subject to change. But I do encourage you to coordinate with community, coordinate with labor as you're building your application, pulling together project labor agreements, evidence of community support, as long as you keep in mind that caveat and just make sure that everyone is aware that, this is subject to change. So if you want to talk this through offline, more than to do that, but we do want to set expectations that all awards are preliminary at this point. Finally, we have resources. So next two webinars, next Tuesday and Wednesday, both at noon Central Time, we have two overviews of templates that will be required for this phase. Particularly if you are planning to submit a fixed wireless application, there's a template specific to you that we would love for you to get this overview on and ask questions about, in addition to the pro forma, budget document, project template. It's all the same registration link, so feel free to register again, and we'll try and add folks to calendar invites so it's easier to remember where to join. And these will all be recorded and available online. We also have office hours starting this Thursday at 1 p.m. Central on Zoom. So similar to previous rounds, this will be kind of one-on-one. So everyone will be put in the waiting room. We'll let in folks one at a time. We'll take you into breakouts as we needed, but we know that your applications are confidential. So don't expect to be hearing everyone's questions and answers. We'll be giving you that one-on-one treatment. And again, I'll send around these links. It's also on our website on our events calendar. Quick plug, we recently launched an Illinois Broadband Jobs Board. We'll send around the link as well, but this is jobs.connectingtheheartland.com. And here you can post jobs for your upcoming deployments, as well as training opportunities. And we'll be pushing out a kind of big marketing and outreach campaign to reach job seekers and convince folks to get into the broadband industry. So this is the form that you'll fill out to post your jobs on this website. All right, and then we've got our final resources here that will be included in the email, but I know we have some questions, so let me go ahead and pivot to the chat. Thanks everyone for listening, and I am going to take a sip of water here so I can answer all your questions. All right, first question. Looking for my and Shubika's contact information. If you are registered for the webinar today, you'll receive the slides, the recording, and that usually comes from me. So you'll get my contact information there and relevant links. So Antonio, that is coming. Rhonda asked for the portal link for ISPs to submit in round 2 applications. Again, we'll be publishing all of the application links online, or they are online right now. So we'll send that link so there's easy access there. Will the applications that were submitted in Wave 1 automatically flow over to Wave 2, assuming the PAUs are still available? So applications that were qualified, but that sort of require further consideration against the extremely high cost per location threshold or need to meet a different additional requirements will be rolled over to Wave 2 for consideration. if your application was not the highest scoring and it was de-scoped so much that it was kind of such a small application, you'll receive this in the communications today, but we'll ask that you just resubmit your application because we want to make sure you can reflect the updated locations and it's still a viable application for us to review in Wave 2. Will ISPs continue using Fabric version 3 for Wave 2 or use version 6? So I would point you to our project area selection tool, and we have a kind of static list of eligible locations in project area units, and that's what you'll use as your source of truth. And if you have questions on kind of how we came to that data set, let me know, and we can pass it to Shabika to share more. Can letters of support be recycled from the previous wave of applications? Yes, but I would just give it a double check to make sure that it's specific to this project. You know, it hits on the specific details of this location. The more, you know, intentional you are about those letters of support, the more points that you will receive. And we have a separate webinar recording that talks specifically about evidence of community support that I can point folks to as well. But the short answer is yes, that's not a problem. Will the round 1 awards be extractable by shapefile on the Illinois broadband map? Shabika, do you think this is possible?
Yeah, we currently did not have this. The project area tool is definitely going to grade them out, Devin, as you shared. But this is something that we can make available as a resource on the sub-grantee selection landing page.
Great. So we can jot that down and I think probably make that happen. All right. We got a comment. I represent a school district that has many rural unserved kids. The ISPs only serve populated areas. So it is likely that these areas, Jerry, that you're referencing are requirements for us to serve through this BEAD program, meaning that they will be, we will be required to get an application from an internet service provider and fund them to connect these locations. And so if you join our webinar next Tuesday, we'll be walking through the map where you can actually search for an address and see which locations are eligible. And if there is a location on that map, it will be receiving broadband service through this program. It's intentionally designed to target those unserved areas that do not have any connection. So would love to work with you offline also. I'm happy to look up an address for you. The close date is June or July. The Wave 2 end date is July 16th at 5 p.m. Central Time. What prevents the state from announcing the ISP with preliminary awards for Connect funding? I believe the ISP application and awards were publicly available. So it's kind of tied to the funding source. Connect Illinois rounds 1 through 3 were state funded or funded through the Capital Projects Fund. Connect Illinois round 4 is funded through the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program through the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, which has a whole other set of rules. And so there's kind of 2 reasons why we can't share the names of preliminary winners. One is because they are preliminary and subject to change. So if you think back to the slide from earlier presentation, there's kind of a whole host of ways that these applications could change. So we want to make sure they, stay preliminary. And then 2, it is a requirement from our funder, from NTIA, that we cannot disclose this information until we finish all 2 to 3 of our application waves, and then submit those preliminary awardees to NTIA with other information like count of households served, proposed dollar amounts. And then once we receive their kind of green light, then we can call them provisional and publish them online. So happy to share more information on that front, but that is kind of part of the rules of how this program runs. Can you share the registration links for the upcoming webinars? it is the same one as today, but maybe Nancy or someone from your team could drop that in the chat. And this will also be in the follow-up email. Where will the full updated list of eligible locations be posted? This will be on the project area selection tool. So this is a map that shows all eligible locations, and this is a tool that applicants will use to select project area units and download them and use that for crafting their application. So the link will be in the follow-up email as well. Okay, we have some concerns that some RDOF awarded areas may not end up getting served in our county. We haven't seen build out yet, and since those areas are not BEAD eligible, they may be left out if RDOF projects default. Thanks for sharing this concern. Anna, if you want to reach out to me separately on the specifics, I'm happy to kind of see which project it is, who the provider is, and we can make some direct connections to get an update there. Okay. Well, right on time here. I think we are at the end of the questions here. So thank you so much to everyone for your participation today. Really excited to launch Wave 2. This is still a long road ahead of us, and so just huge gratitude to everyone who has participated thus far, and looking forward to your continued participation over the next 2 months. And if changes come, we will alert you right away and let you know how this impacts our work. But thanks again, and look out for that follow-up email. And of course, always reachable at my email, devin.bronstein@illinois.gov, or our general email, broadband@illinois.gov. So thank you so much, and see you on next week's webinars.